Wah.
Get up, come on, get down with the sickness. Get up, come on, get down with the sickness. Get up.
Ooh, wah. 5 little noises that, while they didn't hinder the band's success, they certainly hindered their credibility. Disturbed are not really mentioned in the same breath as other nu metal acts like Deftones, Limp Bizkit, and Korn, and that is a shame, because Disturbed boast one of the most consistent discographies until they don't. But oh, we'll get to that mess and a half later. You know the hits, you know the iconography that is the guy, so without further ado, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, it's time to get disturbed.
We had to really build our following on the south side of Chicago in the suburbs. The inner city clubs were a little too intimidated by a sound as heavy as ours. The city was largely dominated by bands the likes of the Smashing Pumpkins, a little bit more sedate than us.
Slogging through the 90s with the hilarious band name Brawl, the band did its usual, early lineup changes before an album-ready set of guys was established.
We went through the painful process of having to seek out the unknown out there. And after we went through our circle of neighborhood friends, of guys who we knew, and nobody was really quite cutting it. We had another singer for about a year, and he couldn't get his act together. And he didn't really have his own identity either, and we wanted to find somebody that had his own voice. So when David finally came through the door, it was a breath of fresh air, because it was something unique about his voice.
The struggle to make a name for themselves was brutal. How brutal exactly?
We beat the hell out of ourselves for 2-3 years as a local band, our own self-promotional mega machine. Every band member in a different venue of the city, anytime a rock show would come through town, passing out our promotional material, cassettes, stickers, t-shirts, whatever we could. So we were, in addition to playing strategically where we thought would make sense, Chicago was an alternative town. It was the Smashing Pumpkins, Local H. It wasn't about metal. So we were blacklisted. We couldn't even play inner city clubs. We weren't cool enough. We were too metal. That was something that wasn't considered cool enough. We had to force our way in.
Eventually, the boys were picked up by Giant Records, who released their debut album, The Sickness. Now, this isn't a case of a band not finding their sound on the word go, as it's more of a case of having a completely different sound on the word go. The Sickness has this weird, experimental-ish, nu metal-ish type of sound that really contrasts with their later output. But hell, it's the year 2000. I'm surprised you could actually find some melody in these songs, as I'm sure it was outlawed around this time. Okay, point taken, but this album does stick out like a sore thumb in a metal scene that desperately needed albums like it. And how could we not talk about Down with the Sickness and those 5 noises that spawned 1,000 jokes?
Down with the Sickness, the wah noise was inspired by a visit to the Chicago Zoo.
No. Who the fuck comes up with this shit? I swear to God. It literally just happened one day. We were practicing, and that beat that Mike starts the song off with is just very primal. There used to just be a pause. We used to pause for dramatic impact, and there was nothing. And one practice, I just went, wow. They all kind of stopped. They're like, the hell is that? And I'm like, I don't know, but there's something to it. Just humor me. Let's do it again. And a couple more times it started sticking with them, and lo and behold, now I'm sure that's what's going to be on my goddamn tombstone. Here lies David Draymond. Great.
That's cool.
Look, this song is an enduring classic, and I think it unironically rocks. But what I refer to as the mental breakdown, where he calls his mom a bitch for 50 seconds, is one of the most lame things in music history. And if The Sickness has any weaknesses, it's that. The bad songs are just lame. The song Conflict rams the word enemy so hard and fast into the ground it gets banned for fracking. Shout 2000 is just a bad cover of a bad song by a bad band, and if Stupefy was your jam back in the day, I just hope you're in a better place.
I've been waiting my whole life for just one rock, and all I needed was just one rock.
But the highs are Mount Everest high. Voices, Fear, The Game, and my personal favorite track, Numb.
Yeah! You created a realm where
The Sickness is an album that'll either make you headbang or laugh so hard you'll be dropping plates. A little something for your ear hole. Get up! But it was a smash success, and Disturbed were a hot new band with the world ahead of them.
There was a dude in a wheelchair on top of the crowd surfing. And security was giving him shit as they were pulling him over the fucking ledge. So I run down there and I'm fucking like got my arms around this kid. I'm like, don't you fucking touch him. And I'm like, give me your hand, give me your hand. You know, like, this kid was so cool.
This is the way I pray.
After the success of The Sickness and Black Sabbath's canceled 2001 tour depriving them of an opening slot, the boys went back into the studio and banged out Believe. And from the opening pounder Prayer, something was off. The band had acquired a completely different sound, ditching the more nu metal, rappy, scatty effects on The Sickness and replacing them with melodious, hard rock. Gone were the lame-o lyrics of The Sickness, and in its place more mindful, religious, and spiritual lyrics. But you have to keep it in its context here. 9/11 wasn't even a year old when this album was being written, and David Draymond's grandfather, who disavowed him when he joined the metal scene, had recently passed away.
It wasn't just the music. My grandfather was a very traditional man. Okay. I come from an Orthodox Jewish background, and he actually
very strict,
is Hasidic. He thought it was the biggest travesty in the world for me to leave a good position as a healthcare administrator to risk everything, including my faith, by going ahead and trying to be a rock star. So he was livid. He didn't want to speak to me. He actually did something that in Judaism is referred to as tearing kriya, which is you tear your garment as if your relative has died.
Right.
So it was pretty serious. And it wasn't actually until he was close to his deathbed that we actually reconciled, which is unfortunate.
The band could have used this angst to craft a sequel to The Sickness, but they knew that sound was on a one-way trip to Nowheresville, so they put their attention towards crafting something better. Every band member simply outdoes themselves. Mike Wengren's drumming and Steve Kamok's bass are so locked in tight the lock-picking lawyer couldn't separate them, and Dan Donegan's staccato riff work on top is just icing on the cake. But David Draymond's vocals, holy God! Loaded with more emotion and passion as the wound of his grandfather's passing was still very fresh, a vocal surgery on his throat to remove a valve that was spraying acid on the cords gave him way more range to work with, and that he does. Believe is just a stupendous album that didn't get the sophomore slump memo. The playing is stupendous, the vocals are amazing, and the lyrics are more than just, oh, oh. If this album were a woman, I'd take it steady with her. She's religious, so you gotta respect that. Best track? Well, that's just got to be Believe itself.
When you lie, you will never.
This album skyrocketed to the top of the charts, continuing Disturbed's streak of good luck. A lot of metal bands don't get this successful, and if they do, they really don't deserve it. But could Disturbed keep it up? Well, I hope you're ready to get fisted.
The idea for the cover itself was one that we came up with, and it just basically entailed the guy sort of leading thousands of people into battle, so to speak, all with their fists raised, all with these serious, stern looks on their faces, and their clothes look like they've just been through a war, and they have some scratches and blood on them here and there, and he's just leading the march, if you will.
After completing the Ozfest tour, as well as the Music as a Weapon tour with bands that if you wear shirts like these, you know very well, original bassist Steve Kamok was let go in 2003 due to personality issues. He would soon be replaced by then session musician and now permanent member John Moyer, who made his debut on the powerful 10,000 Fists, a pounding album that takes the darker parts of The Sickness and marries them with the new sound they created on Believe, using lyrical themes like war, guarding yourselves from others, abuse, and while they don't like to admit it, the Bush administration definitely had an effect on the music. But then again, name me a band that didn't take the piss out of Bush. I'll wait. Yeah, that's what I thought. But other than that, the music is just fucking amazing. If the goal was to make a darker, heavier Believe, they passed with flying fucking carpets.
Man, he passed with flying fucking carpets. It was awesome.
John Moyer's bass work fits like a glove in the Disturbed sound, whose choppy rhythms and soaring melodies are present and accounted for. And now with a welcome new addition, guitar solos. Dan Donegan's way of soloing to serve the song and keen knowledge on when to pull back and fly off the handle makes him one of the most underrated guitarists in modern metal, and he's not alone, by the way. This album also marks the return of Disturbed putting cover songs on their albums, with a cocksure cover of the Genesis tune Land of Confusion. Now, while I do go back and forth on which version I like more, this song proves that Disturbed's cover songs are not shitty.
This is the world we live in.
10,000 Bis will make you its own personal punching bag, and you will love it, you sick freak. Best track? Screw it, it's all of them. When this album has tracks like Overburdened, I'm Alive, and the 10-ton title track, no, there's just no best track. They're all the best tracks. With another #1 album under their belt, could Disturbed top themselves now? Wow. Just... wow. This album slaps harder than Peter Parker. Letting go of longtime producer Johnny K, you've got to have balls to get rid of the producer that gave you 2 back-to-back #1 albums. But Disturbed, man, their balls got balls, dog.
Here comes a secret. It's just tumors, dog.
The lyrical content on this album is the darkest it's ever been, but that's not apparent if you've only listened to the morale-boosting title track. David Draymond went to the depths when coming up with these words, like the powerful Inside the Fire, which tells the harrowing and sadly depressing story of how his girlfriend killed herself when he was just 16 years old.
The background of the song was, I was about 14, 15 years old. I was a freshman in high school, and I came home on spring break from my parochial religious boarding school I was attending, where we were not allowed any interaction with the opposite sex whatsoever, and went out with a buddy of mine who lived across the street from me, and met a friend of his, who I fell for immediately. She had a very bad habit. She was a very serious heroin addict, and pulled me into it a little bit. I was able to get her to pull off of it for a while. She became codependent on me, and I got a phone call very, very early the next morning from that same friend of mine saying that she had killed herself that night. I found her in the corner of some club, slumped on the floor with the syringe still in her arm. And then on the way to the hospital, that all she would say is that it was because of me, that I wouldn't be with her, that there was no point living if I wasn't with her. And he was obviously good enough to tell me that over and over again.
As for the rest of the songs on this album, well, take a gander at some of these lyrics. They sure aren't talking about puppies and kittens, and the music helps push those lyrics deep into your forebrain. The band also went back to songs written before The Sickness and gave them the new Disturbed stamp. Now that the band have found their sound, they've nurtured it. And I just like to say this to any of the knuckle-dragging dipshits who say that, oh, Disturbed just all sounds the same, while beating it raw to bands like Ailstorm and name any metalcore band under the yellow sun. Look, I do get where you're coming from. I like it when bands experiment with their sound sometimes, but God forbid if a band comes out with their own signature sound that they get classified with a case of same song. Christ, it must be hard to fuck you with that stick up your ass. Look, it's called consistency, asshole, if you can even understand a polysyllabic word. What was I talking about again? Oh, right. Indestructible is an amazing album. Best track, The Night, whose haunting chorus will circle your cranium from now till next winter. But then again, when an album is this good, the best track could change tomorrow. I have no reservations in saying that this is quite possibly my favorite Disturbed album, and it's another #1 to add to the scoreboard, and the next one would come barreling down the birth canal not too long after.
That was the first song finished of this writing session. And when I first finished it, and I first relayed the idea to Danny for the melody. I went to him and I had an idea for the name. I said, what do you think about calling the record Asylum? It's like, I don't know, it's a little early for that. I'm like, I don't know, I have a feeling about this track. And lo and behold. So it was literally right from the inception of it.
Boasted as being darker than Indestructible, 2010's Asylum was released from its bonds to wreak havoc on your record player. The band's second self-produced affair, I just have to admit it now. There's an exception to the point I made in my Judas Priest retrospective. Hey, musicians, sometimes it's better to swallow your ego and let producers be outside voices on your material. It's okay. Now, I wouldn't consider this album to be darker than Indestructible, and hell, I wouldn't even consider it to be better. But if you think I'm backpedaling on the praise I gave it, you're an idiot. I love Asylum. Riffs so heavy a professional bodybuilder couldn't lift them, melodies cold enough to chill your blood, and those always popular Disturbed lyric topics. The day a positive song comes out about global warming that isn't ironic, I'll do a retrospective naked. And how about those cheery subjects like false imprisonment on innocence and post-breakup depression on the infection? Doesn't that just put a smile on your face? Yep. This is an authentic smile. If there is one weak link on this album though, it's the U2 cover. I still haven't found what I'm looking for, but that's just due to personal reasons. I don't like U2 on a good day, so a cover really isn't going to change my mind. Hey, I could be an honest reviewer and make my biases open, or fence it so hard my ass bonds to it at the subatomic level. Your choice. Best track? Well, much like Mare de Noms on my A Perfect Circle retrospective, for personal reasons, the song Serpentine takes that high honor. By Asylum Asshole. Not 1 year after this album came out, the band released a B-sides collection called The Lost Children. And while it does have some cool songs on it, it's not going to be covered here, so listen to that on your own time. But the big news was that the band were going on hiatus.
We're not entirely sure what the future holds for us right now. We've always sort of operated with a timeline. Every time we finish the cycle, and we don't really have one right now. And we're just really trying to focus on finishing up the cycle with the best shows that we can, and we'll see what the future holds when the time comes.
We've given our lives to that band, but there's more to us, each individually.
Well, I couldn't find any conflicting stories, personal or otherwise, on why the hiatus happened. I guess I'll just have to mark it up to exhaustion. The album tour cycle spares nary a victim in the music world, so I can see why they needed a break. But oh boy, when they came back...
John went to go work with Adrenaline Mob for a little while, and he's got his music school that he's trying to get off the ground. I know Dan and Mike have been enjoying spending time with their families, and I hear whisperings that they have a little thing going on as well.
Solo projects was the flavor of the week during the hiatus, with Draymond starting a band called Device and the other members working on separate projects. But under our noses the entire time, work was being done on a new Disturbed album.
You feeling the itch yet? And,
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I kind of am. And so in March, I went to Chicago with the whole family.
Okay,
And sat down with Danny and his family. Mike came up from Milwaukee, and we all had dinner together. And our manager,
have a
Jeff.
natural hangout. You know, let's all see each other.
Yeah, and that's when we kind of carried those conversations further. And it was only maybe 3-4 weeks later that I got my first batch of material from Dan to start listening to and to start trying to create some things for.
The single, The Vengeful One, ripped ass, and when the rest of the album came soon after, in my humble opinion, it did not disappoint. Be it the hiatus itself or the addition of a producer for the first time since Indestructible, Immortalized is a beast of an album. It's more light and shade than traditional Disturbed material. The experimentation was quickly noticed by fans and critics alike, and while some whispered voodoo incantations to songs like The Light and the smash hit cover The Sound of Silence, the classic Disturbed sound is still here, and the cuts are prime, like my favorite song, Open Your Eyes. However, this album is not a perfect 10 out of 10. Fired Up is one of the worst stoner songs not written by Cypress Hill, and it does admittedly drop off in quality near the halfway point, but you can say that about a lot of albums, even really good ones. Immortalized, at least when it hits, bends you over the banister and throttles you like a belt sander. It's a new look for Disturbed, but at least here, it's welcome. But that welcome would be worn out quick.
Are you ready? Get up!
God help me. I was actually excited for Evolution. I was given momentary pause when I heard the band were evolving their sound, but I remained open, which any person who's dropped the soap in the prison shower knows is a bad move. Evolution is just a bad album, people. Hopefully the only bad album we'll hear from this band. Oh, but Liam, The Sickness isn't a good album either. Granted, but at least the bad tracks on The Sickness will give you a laugh. I'll take that over mind-numbing boredom any day. Actually, I take that back. I'd rather take mind-numbing boredom over, hey, our Sound of Silence cover was a huge hit. Let's make 4 carbon copies that all suck. Don't worry, we'll call it spreading our creative wings. Yeah, Disturbed, we see through you like the sluttiest lingerie on planet Earth.
So now go to the best things in life.
There's no best track on this album. I'd have more fun doing my taxes than giving this one more spin. Evolution. Return to Monkey, Disturbed. You gave us your music from the Elder, now deliver unto us your creatures of the night. Well, on that sour note, thank you all once again for sitting with me on this episode of the Retrospective series. Until next time, I'm Liam Winfield. Keep on rockin'.
Chat, what's responsible for more gains? Anabolic steroids, psychotic pre-workout, or Disturbed, the band?
Disturbed.
100% Disturbed.
The fuck?
Disturbed is like a performance-enhancing drug, and it's responsible for more gains than anything else on planet Earth. Uh-oh, is this the beginning of a Disturbed song? Are we listening to Indestructible?
Yeah, but look, you have to also factor, most of the people who are listening to Disturbed at the gym are also doing steroids.